It says I'm live, but it also says setting up my video. So I'm going to go ahead and assume I'm live. Hi, everyone. I'm Jenny Robertson, and I'm one of the hosts of the Real Women, Real Purpose talk show. We are live right now in the On Purpose Woman global community on Facebook, and I'm here with not just a really remarkable woman, but a good friend. And we'll talk about that friendship in a little bit, Elaine. But Elaine Robinson Beattie. And Elaine is a leadership coach, a speaker, and trainer. And we're going to be talking about her story of being Black and in business. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. And Elaine, I was trying to remember how long we've known each other. I know I've known you longer than I've known Dawn, and I've known Dawn for 28 years. So do you remember about what year that was that we connected?
Gosh, it had to be what, the late 80s, mid 80s?
I was thinking, because you were in DC, you were working at the hotel in DC at the time. And just to tell everybody, I'm not going to tell them the whole story, but Elaine and I were connected from a friend. She needed to be in the area for some programs that I was working for the company was doing. And this guy said, could she stay at your apartment for the weekend? And I'm like, sure. There was no internet. There was no way we could connect with each other and like say, am I going to like her? She's coming for the weekend. It was an instant connection. And we laughed so much. And then you came back for another weekend. And, the princess story is for another time. I won't go into that today, but we
Thank you.
really, yeah, we've lost touch over the years and we've remained, I don't know, you've been in my heart. And then I found you, I guess, on Facebook a few years ago. And you've lived in, I think, three different places since we lost touch. You've gone back to New York, then Houston or Dallas. I forget where you
No,
were.
I was in Dallas, Miami, and then Asheville.
Yes,
Right.
I forget about the Miami piece because I didn't know anything about you then. So you're in Atlanta now, and
Right.
we get to see each other a few years ago. So that's really. But I love Zoom that we can also chat every once in a while and just talk. But for those of you who aren't fortunate enough to know who Elaine is, let me tell you a little bit about her. Elaine Robinson is an inspirational speaker, leadership coach, and facilitator specializing in organizational leadership development and business coaching. Her expertise expands across corporate, nonprofit, and faith-based organizations, and she has over 30 years experience in leadership and management. She holds two master's degrees in leadership and has earned the distinction of becoming a registered corporate coach. She lives in Atlanta with her husband Chuck and their dog, Ella Fitzgerald Robinson Beattie. Love the dog's name. Only you, my friend. Only
I
you.
mean, only.
We're going to talk about this idea of your being a Black woman and being in business. And so you mentioned that you'd suffered many losses and that you were still able to recover, that you have faith, that you made better decisions, you got clarity, and you moved into purpose and joy. So let's start with some background here. As a Black woman in business, talk about some of the losses that you feel that you suffered during that. Not that you're not still a Black woman in business, but we're going back a few years, right?
We're going back a few years. Yeah. And Jenny, let me just preface this by saying that it is my story. I don't speak for all Black women. I don't speak for all Black people, right? I just want to say that because sometimes people will mishear things.
Right.
And
Very
I
important.
honestly am just sharing this from my perspective. Okay. So just want to clarify that. So let me just say that too, it has not been all about losses, but there is this opportunity to recover, right? To do work, to do what you think you're been called to do, or just do what you do, and then you run into a wall or you run into a barrier, and then you experience a loss, and then it's about recovery. And I think the first set of losses, when I think about being in business, happened when I was going up the corporate ladder, right? Where was thinking like, well, why didn't I get offered that opportunity? Well, like, well, how come they got, that promotion? How come, so those were the first set of losses, if you would, that I experienced.
And did in the back of your mind, were you saying to yourself, and maybe speculating, or did you ever go to anyone and say, why was I passed over for that? Or
Well, yeah, because all things being equal, right? I thought, well, I have the education, I
Mhm.
have the experience. I think I present well, professionally. I attend all the trainings that they attend. Uh, and in the business that I was in, hospitality, it wasn't strange that women were in business, although the white males were basically at the top, but it
Mhm.
wasn't, indifferent, right, for women to be there. So I thought, well, what is the other difference? And the other difference was me being a Black female.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you're not speaking, these are your stories and you're not speaking for all Black women. I really think that's an important distinction because I know that, and I'm not speaking for all white people, I'll speak for
Right.
me, but I know there can be a tendency sometimes to like want to know, well, Elaine, how do you all feel about this, right? But people don't usually ask me how white people feel about stuff.
Right.
And so I
Yeah.
think that's an important distinction. And what I'm really, with all the challenging times that we're having, what I'm really most liking about this is that we are starting to have some really honest conversations in areas that maybe didn't have honest conversations before.
Right.
So the
And
stories are
Jenny,
so important. That's what I want
right.
to say.
And as you know, you and I again are friends, and one of the reasons why I even agreed to doing this interview is because we are friends, and I love this community of women because we are a community of friends and professionals and a community. And so you can have good conversations when you're connected, when you are friends, when there is some history, when there is some sharing of stories. We have a deeper understanding, or we're open to listening and hearing one another, and that is so important.
Oh, I so agree with you because if we're trying to force somebody into a conversation, hear me, that's not going to have the same impact as it does when the conversation kind of grows organically, I think. And it only grows organically if there's some trust.
Well, yeah, and the thing is exactly, because I become suspicious. Like, so why do you want to know? What are you going to do with the information? Why should I take my time to educate you on something that you probably need to search out for yourself?
Yeah. And I'll say that was a real eye opener for me a few years ago because I was part of a group that was kind of a political group online. And there were a lot of conversations being had about race at the time. This has been about 4 years ago. And I remember, somebody saying, well, give me some books to read. And, a couple of the Black women would say things like, educate yourself, please. This is not my job. And at first I was like, whoa, and then I started to listen because I'd never heard anybody have the courage to say that in a forum like that, where they weren't
Yes.
among just their friends or even anybody that they knew necessarily. So let me just get this out of the way then. You say that we find common ground when we take the time to listen to one another's stories. So let's just say that I, as a white woman, might find some of these stories uncomfortable. Or while hearing them, I might make up some stories of my own that might deflect and make your story not true, right? Or this is one I really like to hear. And I know I've had these conversations in my head before, and I understand now that why they're not the best conversations to have in my head and to not say them out loud is, but Elaine, not I've never done that before. Not all white people are like that. And so I think when we get those defensive positions that say, well, wait, you're talking about me. Now I feel offended because I never did anything like that. And I've had those feelings in the past. And then I started thinking, wow, I'm worried about being offended. Big deal. It wasn't
Yeah.
intended for me personally. It was intended, they were talking about their experience. And I think that's what's so important. Your story is your story. But if we don't share those stories, we don't get a window into each other's soul, if you will.
Absolutely, Jenny. And I think, for all of us, it's important to really learn how to listen, right? Just listen. We're
Mhm.
not listening to respond. I mean, these are just basic skills, right? Basic leadership skills, basic management skills. Are we listening to what is being said, without trying to figure out a response. Again, what is my part in this? That's not the point. If you want to understand, right? We listen for understanding. Then we are in the story together. But if we are listening, right, for a rebuttal, to relieve our guilt, to relieve our shame, to relieve our whatever, we're not listening.
Oh, wow. Can I write that all down? That is a great point. I love that. When I've heard the phrase that sometimes we seek to respond, we listen to respond rather than to hear. But I love what you said about if we're truly listening. Well, see, I've lost it that quick. We become part of the story or part of the experience,
And
right?
Jenny, if you ask me to repeat it, I can't
I
repeat it. It
know,
just
me
came
either, but I
out.
know it touched me. So there we go. We'll have to listen to the replay and get
Right,
that back.
exactly.
And so I
Yeah.
think that's just such an important point, though, because there is this tendency, I think, and I remember up into my mid 30s being a terrible listener just because I would always be, what am I going to say next? What am I going to say next? Oh, I didn't like that. Even just a normal conversation, it'd have to be a tough conversation. Just, I got to get this right. What am I going to say? And that's just, I guess it's a taught thing or it's a cultural, I don't know what it is, but it's
I-
something that we just, and it also is a fear-based thing.
Yeah,
I think,
and I think it has a lot to do. It's an American thing, actually. I think,
oh,
but
there you go.
yeah, yeah. But if we're listening for understanding, I think I said if we're listening for
Yes.
understanding, right? If we're listening for understanding, we have to hear it, and we have to hear it on so many levels, right? Like what was said, what wasn't said, what was the context. Um, if we are listening with all of our senses, right? We listen at a deeper level.
Mhm. Otherwise, we're just planning our rebuttal.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what about an organization? So, how do leaders set that tone and intention that not only do stories need to be told, they need to be listened to? What's been your
Yeah.
experience with that?
Yeah. Jenny, I teach organizational development. And one of the things that I often teach and I try to model is what they call the Tuckman uh, group development, right, model. And there's 5 stages, right? Some would say 7 of group development. And the first one is forming, right? There's forming, storming, norming, and performing. You've heard that,
I have
right?
heard that.
Okay. Yeah. Oftentimes when we get to work, we just want to get to work. And we've bypassed 2, 3 stages. The forming stage, which is where I get to know you and you get to know me, is so important,
Mhm.
right? Then when we start having some storming, some just different ideas coming together that actually collide, conflict, we can work our way through it without destroying one another. We're more focused on what we're talking about or working about as opposed to making it a personal attack, right? So, we have the forming, we have the storming, and then we have the norming. Then we can get to setting standards and procedures and policies and things like that. But if we bypass those other 2 stages, we're not going to engage and excel and be effective as an organization. If
Mhm.
I don't take the time to hear and know you, I would not know that you are a great communicator, that you are empathetic, that you have great leadership skills, right? As far as being a visionary, great networking skills. I need to hear and talk with you to know that that is who you are, and you hopefully will be interested in doing the same for me. When we
Mhm.
understand our skills, when we understand our abilities, when we take the time to listen to our experiences, we bring all that, right, to the task at hand. And then when we start brainstorming, when we start having maybe differences of opinion, we know what's being brought to the table. And
Mhm.
then again, we can make some decisions and then move on and again, set some strategies that will hopefully be effective in the long term.
That makes such sense. And I remember hearing that whole stages of development years ago, and I've never been in any kind of a group where that didn't always happen. And you're right. If you just want to, a lot of the leaders will try to shut down the storming part too,
Yeah,
won't they? Because,
like
oh, we
it's
don't
not
want
important.
conflict here. Yeah. Yeah. We're
And
supposed to
we
hold
have
hands
to.
and sing, and act like we get it.
Absolutely. I mean, we've talked about our husbands a little bit and how different they are
Mhm.
from us, but just how important they are to us and what they bring. My husband is patient and, again, he listens on a different level. He's more moderately paced than I am, and it works well with who I am, right? So, this is what we do. We take these gifts and talents and these different abilities in an organization, put them together, and then we start really working well together. That to me is part of what I call being culturally, I call it being a cultural superpower, right? When we looked at the individual gifts and talents and collectively, right? And then we, put it together with some creativity, and then we're courageous about what we do, right? Because some of this really can be a little daunting. Some of the things we're being asked to do by the world, by,
Mhm.
our companies, if we don't really have these other foundational things set in place, and if we really don't know one another, it comes down to relationship.
Okay. Yes, it sure does. So think back to some of those experiences that you had as a Black woman in business, and maybe they haven't been all of them haven't been that long ago, I would guess too.
No.
What kind of a difference would it have made if the leaders of your company, your organizations, had come from that perspective of, because it sounds like they really didn't know Elaine well enough to know, or hadn't taken the time to know her well enough to know that perfect fit for that position. Am I on track
Right.
here?
Right. They would look at me in some instances and say, yes, we want that. And then they would do like almost like a bait and switch, right? No, no, we really, just kidding. Just kidding. I remember I was hired by one company and, oh, Elaine, you're exactly what we need and you're what we want. But then yet I was mentored and trained by particularly white males. And then I would be told, no, we don't do that here. Or Elaine, just get over it.
Oh,
Or that always happens. And I'd be particularly talking about how people related to me or what my experience was, I was in the hospitality industry, and I was in the kitchen one day, and this chef was running around screaming the N-word and cussing at people and all this other stuff. And I just thought it was just really unprofessional, right? I thought,
you
my
think?
God. Yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah.
Right. So I go to so I take my little tail to the director of human resources, and she says, "Oh, Elaine, it's really not that big a deal. It happens all the time in our industry."
Wow.
Yeah. And I thought, but it's hurtful. It's hurtful. And I felt like I I felt like I was being it was verbal abuse.
Yes. Yes. So
And I
feeling
didn't feel
like
like
you
I
knew it
needed to
better.
stay there. And
Yeah.
like, why do I have to stay in this environment? And they were basically saying either you do that, or you don't get a check for this particular part of the program.
Mm.
Yeah. So that's one instance. uh, Again, it's looking at the context that I come from and recognizing that my viewpoint is different, and I see it differently. I hear it differently. It doesn't land the same way, and that my perspective is important. It's important and it's different. Would you just consider that and allow me to bring my entire self to the table?
And what a loss if you're not. I mean, what a
Happens
huge
every day,
loss.
Jenny. It
Yes.
happens every day to so many people. Now, I will say that there are lots of companies that really, they believe that they've got a good thing, they've got a good culture, they condition people, not, like brainwashing, but, let's get with the company, right? And that's a good thing. It can be, but you still have to acknowledge people's differences, and particularly the cultures and the context and the experiences that people bring.
Mm-hmm. It takes
Of
courage to do
value,
that. Yeah.
and that it's valuable.
Yeah. I remember this, and this is coming just from a woman's perspective. Back in my early days of my corporate career, I was in a male dominated industry, and this company bought us out. It was a huge company anyway, a much larger company bought us, and they were a lot more into social responsibility and things like that. And they came in and says, not only do you have any women or minorities in positions of leadership, you're doing nothing to help them get there. And so they picked 10 women. And, quite frankly, I don't remember if there were any women of color in that program or not. There were 10 of us, because I think I like blocked it mostly out, except for this one thing I really remember. That, of course, all the courses were taught by white men because they had nobody else to teach them, but they're teaching us to how to succeed in this world. And this guy was talking about supervising people. And he said this, and he said it with just the same amount of tone. Don't you dare nurture your employees. You're not their mother. And he made nurture and mother sound like nasty words.
Absolutely.
And then we
Absolutely.
were taught to be masculine because who we brought to the table as women wasn't valued. All
And
those wonderful things around nurturing and leading and mentoring and things like that. So,
great example, and
yeah.
a great example, great example. And funny that you said that, because I've designed a management training program, and just acquired a new client who is determined, much like your company, to help level the playing field, bring equity to their executive level,
Mm.
because they realize there are no minorities, there's a few women, and they are looking to fast track and hopefully, again, level the playing field by offering management training to some high achieving and excelling potential leaders.
That's really great. And yet part of me goes, my experience was 45 years ago, but yet we're still having to go into companies and teach them how to do this, or teach them that they even need to do it, not even how yet.
Absolutely.
But 45 years later, yeah, that's disheartening and kind of heartening all at the same time, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So you also said something in a write-up that you gave me that I just loved. And you said that leaders and business owners are visionaries with a purpose, and that we must all use our position, our privilege, and our power to ensure that those we work with and serve are treated with respect, dignity, and compassion. And we've touched on that some. We've really touched on how it looked in the most worst scenario. We could probably spend an entire few hour interview on just that one topic, but how can leaders begin to use their power more in that way? Um, because I think first, I mean, from just what I've observed, first they have to actually know there's an issue. They have to wake up a little bit, right? And kind of go, oh, this has been going on all around me.
Right. And again, by the sheer definition, Jenny, visionaries are seers, right?
Yeah.
So we see, and hopefully we are seeing with wide eyes, right? What is around us. And most importantly, as visionaries, who's missing from the table, who's not being represented. I think as when we get into leadership positions, we are called to do justice work,
Mm.
right? We are called to do equity work. We are called to make sure that people are treated and serviced uh, respectfully. Um, Again, recognizing that everybody doesn't come from the same positioning, and we've got to look at how do we get that service or that product to these people in a way that is affirming and inclusive and giving them what they need instead of what we think they need.
Mm, wow, that's an excellent point. Can you say more about that?
Well, sometimes we go into organizations, and I will say I have to spank my own hand on this, where I've been the executive director of a community based organization, and was serving the community and thought I knew what they needed. And I actually acquired a $10,000 grant for an organization and walked up real proudly with the check and said, "Here you go." And they said, "We didn't ask for this.
Wow.
What makes you think we need this?" Well, I went on the internet and pulled down, their needs statement and put it through for a grant. I tried to get in contact with them, but it was a short period of time. Anyway, the long story short is we did not have a conversation. And I thought I knew what they needed. This happens all the time. This happens all the time where we think we know what someone else needs as opposed to asking them, "How may I help you? What is it that you need? What is it that you want?"
Yeah. Imagine if that HR person had said that to you after you left the kitchen. What do you need from me right now, Elaine?
Yes. One simple
Be
question.
heard, I guess, to be heard first, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. And to know that this person was going to be, spoken to at least, and just said,
right.
this is unprofessional behavior. I am a young person, learning about the industry. This was no role model,
Right. Sounds like that
so
person had bought into their own, the young PR about chefs and how they're allowed to have that kind of temperament or something, that they're allowed to
exactly.
abuse people.
Exactly. So that's the other thing, Jenny. As visionaries, we have to realize the cultures. We are ultimately responsible for the cultures that we created.
Mm,
It is our responsibility, right? So, we have a vision, we communicate the vision, we set up, policies and procedures to make sure that the culture is set. But is it inclusive?
mhm.
Is it supportive? Right? Does everyone have equal or opportunities? Right? People are looking for opportunities to succeed. So, in what ways do we have procedures, policies set that hinder people from moving forward?
Yeah. And let's just take that out of even the corporate or nonprofit sector and bring it down to our own small businesses for a minute. Something as simple as creating a group on Facebook. And I say, I want women of color to show up. I want all kinds of diversity. I want women of all ages and locations and races and blah, blah, blah. And I've had that experience actually. And I remember years ago when I started my in-person meetings and I wanted it to be open to everyone. And I kept thinking, I don't want to show up and be with a bunch of people just like me. I want to bring people together. That was my, kind of vision, bringing people together for conversation. And I remember saying something to a Black woman friend of mine after about 6 meetings where, some Black women had trickled in and out. And I said, why aren't they coming? Again, I was asking her to be responsible for the entire Black race in that question. But she gave me a bit of an answer and she said, she goes, women don't know if they can trust you yet. And I was grateful for the honesty in that. But yet
Yes.
part of me went, well, why wouldn't they trust me? They don't even know me. She goes, that's right. They don't know you. Because I'm
Yeah.
thinking they wouldn't trust me because of something they knew. And she goes, just keep doing what you're doing, be consistent. And it's this whole idea of, I remember I had a speaker at one of my conferences talking about, she was also a Black woman, talking about if you're an inclusive company, then your branding needs to reflect that. And she would pull up some examples. These people say they want to have, all kinds of clients, but every woman in this brochure is white. If I don't see myself in that brochure, I'm not going to feel like it's for me. And so I think,
Absolutely.
and I don't know that everybody's consciously going in and saying, I really want to be inclusive. However, a lot of people certainly know they don't want to be exclusive. So it's not enough. I guess this is just coming to me. I didn't even know I was going to say all this, but it's not enough to just not be exclusive, right?
Absolutely. You have to be intentional. We have to be intentional about inviting young people. We have to be intentional about, again, looking at people of different faith groups. I mean, the diversity is wide. We're not just talking black, white, right? Like, I know the topic that we're talking about today, but when we talk about diversity, it is a wide net.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I say that if you say that, then be ready, right? I was doing some work with a church once and they said, oh, we want to be inclusive. We want to do this. I said, are you sure about that? Because I think you like the way you are. And if you like the way you are, then just say that. Because people want you to be authentic, right? Yeah. Don't just do it because it's the in thing to do. I mean, okay, so we've seen the injustices and some people are being more compelled today to do things than they did yesterday. But you know what? As the woman said, you need to be trusted. Don't just do it now for a month or 2 or 3. Yeah. Make sure that your policies and procedures support your strategies. Make sure you have people in place that are going to hold people accountable, right? There's a lot of work to be done. When you say that, yeah, it not only has to be communicated, it's got to be enforced, it's got to be reiterated. There's a lot of work that has to be done.
So it's not just a slogan like those mission statements we used to do in the corporate companies I work for, yes, that were really only the people in the company knew about them, but yet they didn't understand because we weren't doing that. But they went, well, I mean, they went on the wall for all the, I messed that up. They went on the wall for the clients to see. Yes. We weren't practicing that within, yes, the walls of the building, you know.
And it's the quickest way to lose customers, and it's the quickest way to lose good employees. Because remember, employees are customers too. They're your internal customers, and they go home and talk to their families, and they go home and talk to their neighbors. And when your employees know that you are not living up to your word, they talk about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow. Well, something else I want to delve into a little bit, sure, is that I know from your experience, you've kind of concluded that people of color and women lead differently than white men. Can you talk about those differences a bit and why it's important that we have some of everything?
You know, traditionally, African people, and also, you know, again, African American people are communal people. We are communal people. So we don't just think about ourselves, we think about everyone. We think about everyone. How does it affect, you know, my husband, my children, my, you know, my aunt, whatever, right? We think about the entire family first. And then we think about the community. How does it, you know, everybody's included. Mm. And so with that being said, right, we think communal. So we're not isolating out this person, and we're not trying to make everybody do it our way, right? So we just say, y'all come. Mm. Y'all come. Whereas, and it's not from a position of power, you know, like how much power can I exert over you? You know, how can I control your behavior? You know, I'm not saying that you can't set boundaries and you can't set, you know, some things in place, but that's not the first thing that we think of. Mm-hmm. We've always had to work very, very hard. And as Black women, we are accustomed to thinking on different levels, on seeing different levels. We've had to do it all our lives, right? But a white male or white woman may not have had that experience, right? So we're used to being inclusive. It's just who we are. It's just how we think, oftentimes, yeah, right? America is a very individualistic place. right? You can go to Latin America, you can go again to Africa, you can go to lots of other different countries where Asia, right? Communal is the way that we think, is the way that people think, right? It's not an American thing.
Yeah, the rugged individualist has always been honored here. I
Yeah.
can do it by
I,
myself. Thank you. You know,
yeah, the whole pull yourself up by your bootstraps thing. Well, who said I had boots?
right, right.
Who said I had boots? You know, so anyway, so I think we lead inclusively. I think we lead with love and compassion. People usually have some kind of faith foundation, right? So, you know, I happen to be Christian. You know, I try to lead as Jesus, taught us. So there's a faith component to it. Um, and we bring all that with us. We bring all that with us. We don't think compartmentalized, it just comes with us, right? And so I have had white men to literally say, leave that at the door.
Mm.
No. And I'm saying, we encourage you to bring your whole self to work. That whole compartmentalization has caused, I would probably say, a lot of people to go to their nearest healthcare provider, mental health care provider.
Yeah. I mean, I know I felt that way just because, and, not dealing with, and I even hesitate to say, yeah, I felt that way, but, mine is like this big. But just having this boss that I thought was just so horrific. And I had to play a role when I was there because had the real me ever shown up, I would have been like just probably let out in handcuffs, because of how I was really feeling about the way she abused people and things like that. But, so I felt like I left Jenny at the door. I went in, I did my job, I picked her up, but sometimes I'd forget to pick her up at the end of the day.
Exactly. Exactly.
So then it starts to affect everything.
Absolutely. And I would say also to Jenny that there is also this innate, if you would, ability to be able to make do with what we have, to be really creative.
Mhm.
And my husband and I laugh. He always likes to take things and reuse them, right? Repurpose so but I think that we think that way, like how can we repurpose, right, what we have, and how can we do what we need to do with what we have, right? There's a tenacity, there is a determination, there is a sense of I must complete this.
So then does that give the courage, the strength, the whatever to go in and do whatever is necessary to do this job I've said yes to, regardless of what's going on around me here? And then I pick myself back up when I leave. I
Yes,
pick
and
that stuff you
again,
made me leave at the door. I pick that up then when I go.
yeah, and yes, and the other thing is, again, it's not about me. It's
Mhm.
never about me. It is about the other people. So I'm not just doing it for me, right?
Right.
When
Okay.
I was going through climbing up the corporate ladder, or when I stepped out in faith and moved to Asheville to start my own business, it was not about me. It was about other people. I wanted to be and go forth in leadership because I wanted to open the doors for other women of color to come behind me.
Mm.
But again, there's a stress and a strain. Well, I've got to be good. They need to know that that others can be just as efficient and effective and professional as I am. So it's never about us. It's always about being able to bring more with us.
Wow. Thank you for that. And I don't recall that I mean, I think as I matured maybe, into my 40s, especially after I left that environment, I think I started to feel more of a responsibility to younger women to kind of be something for them. But that was never my impetus for doing much of anything in the earlier days.
Oh, it
Okay.
was it was it was my driving force.
Yeah.
It was my driving force.
Yeah.
And it drove me to start organizations, to lead organizations, to be able to share the information that I learned, right? Like, almost like Harriet Tubman, right? Did you see the movie? Did you see the
Hmm.
movie? Yeah, right. So you learn the way, and then you go back and you get others and you show them the way.
Wow. And there's a lot of pressure in that, though. Like you said, you better don't disappoint anyone. Because, in fact, I saw a great quote from somebody whose name I'm not going to remember, and I'm not even going to remember the quote that well. But she was a celebrity, and she said, as a Black woman, if I do something poorly, no one says, oh, she didn't do that well. They say, oh, Black women can't do that.
Without question.
And I had never actually looked at it that way before myself. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
a lot of
There's
pressure.
a lot of pressure, a lot of strain. We work under pressure every day.
Mhm.
I'm in Asheville and somebody said to me, Elaine, you always look dressed up. I said, yes, because I'm self-employed and I never know when I'm going to run into someone. And I said, and I can't take the chance that, I can't take that chance, right? I'm self-employed,
Mhm.
single.
Right. Yeah.
I cannot take the chance that they don't see me as a professional.
Mm. Lots to think about here. Thank you, my friend. Anything that you'd like to add that I haven't touched on? Again, we could have had a 3-week conversation on any one of these topics, but
Jenny, we started out with talking about sharing my story. Stories are so important.
Mhm.
If we just sit down and take the time to have coffee with someone and hear their story and hear where they're coming from, you and I have talked and shared, and again, we find common ground when we share our stories.
Mhm.
And then we can work together on something that we maybe have passionate about together. It's not about drumming up something or, yeah, again, trying to relieve our our guilt or shame or the fact that we just haven't done anything about, if you would, the injustices of the world, right? If we're visionaries, we should be compelled to do something for other people,
Mhm.
creating economic opportunities, looking at housing. I mean, there's just so many problems in the world. How do we feed the hungry? How do we get people off the streets, right? How do we put people to work? How do we get people out of jail and help them to recover and become returning citizens? I mean, just pick one, right? How do we help women who are being abused? There are so many injustices in the world. And I think with all of our companies, with all of our businesses, we can find a way to do some good. We need to do some good.
Yes. Great last words. I'm going to add another sentence though. From what you're saying, I believe this is what I heard you say, that all of this can start with a simple conversation.
With a simple conversation.
And that's something we can all do.
We can all do it. Hopefully we have some kind of motivation, and it's not about, well, let me see, there's a real innate pure motivation of wanting, of curiosity,
Mm.
right?
Mhm.
Of
Yeah.
curiosity. Gosh, and not to the point where, like, I'm curious, oh gosh, because you don't want to be anybody's I don't know what the word is. I'm missing a word there. But if we just come with a pure sense of curiosity and how we can maybe find common ground, I think that we can have some really sweet, loving, compassionate, exciting conversations.
Yes, and where we each just come with that, if we each come with that sense of curiosity, then we're not needing to fix anything or defend anything. We're just having a conversation and everything can be on the table. I love that. Thank you. Elaine, how can people find out more about you and the work that you do?
Thank you, Jenny. And again, thank you so much for inviting me. This has been sweet, as always. I love my time with you. I can be reached at elainespeaking.com. That's my website. I can be, my phone number is on there, 404-981-1155. Elaine at Elaine Speaking. Real simple. Elaine at Elaine Speaking. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, my friend. And before we wrap up today, I want to thank all of you here for joining us today and listening to the Real Women, Real Purpose talk show. Again, I am Jenny Robertson. I'm one of the co-hosts of this talk show. And if you love this interview and you want to share it with your friends, you'll find it on our YouTube channel. It'll be up in the next 48 hours. So go over to the On Purpose Woman Global Community on YouTube. Please subscribe and sign up for notifications. There are already more than 25 inspiring, informative, and fun shows for you to watch on the YouTube channel. And this Friday, I'm interviewing Vale Leonard, who is the founder and CEO of the Light of Truth Center. And the Light of Truth Center is an organization I've been volunteering with for over 18 years, and it supports Baltimore area women in recovering from addiction to drugs and alcohol. And Vale and I will be talking about addiction. It's a disease, not a moral dilemma. You don't want to miss this conversation because Vale has some truly innovative ideas about addiction and helping people, especially women, to recover. Also, two great interviews coming up next week. On Monday, my co-host Catherine Yarborough will interview Joanne Bracken, and they'll talk about change your frequency to reboot your life. And then on Thursday of next week, I'm going to interview Catherine, something we haven't done yet. And we're going to be talking about 7 steps to unleash your light on Facebook. And so in a couple of weeks after that, Catherine will be interviewing me because we thought it would be kind of a fun thing to do since we hadn't done that yet. So again, thank you for being here for the Real Women, Real Purpose talk show. Thank you to my guest, Elaine Robinson Beattie. And I just hope to see you somewhere out there and go and watch all of our stuff. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.